The alarm blared through the corridors of the Interstellar Medical Exchange Station as Kyle Evans stumbled backward, clutching his bleeding arm. He'd been on board the orbital facility for less than 3 days, Earth's first medical exchange officer with the Galactic Health Coalition, and now found himself in the middle of what could only be described as chaos. "It's just a cut," Kyle shouted over the blaring emergency sirens. The 3 Vexillian medics, tall, blue-skinned beings with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, had backed away from him, their limbs trembling as they stared at the crimson liquid seeping between his fingers. Chief Medical Officer Trell had pressed herself against the far wall of the medical bay, her breathing apparatus wheezing rapidly. "Containment breach, possible biohazard exposure," she called out, voice quavering through her translator. Kyle glanced down at his arm where the sharp edge of a fallen sample container had sliced through his uniform and into his flesh. It wasn't deep, but it was bleeding steadily. The Vexillians were acting as if he'd sprung a leak of deadly neurotoxin. "It's just human blood," Kyle explained, trying to keep his voice calm despite the throbbing pain. "It's normal for us, not dangerous to you." The 3rd alien medic, Xerix, seemed to be having some sort of panic attack, his outer eyelids fluttering rapidly. "The fluid, it's escaping the body." "So much red. Is this normal exsanguination for your species?" Kyle sighed, realizing the alien medical team was completely useless in this situation. The wound needed pressure and a bandage, nothing more. Wincing, he used his good hand to grip the bottom of his uniform shirt and with a sharp tug, tore a strip of fabric from it. The sound of ripping cloth seemed to startle the aliens even further. "What are you doing?" gasped Trell. "Self-mutilation of protective coverings is not advisable during a medical emergency." Kyle ignored them as he wrapped the makeshift bandage around his forearm, using his teeth to help pull it tight. The bleeding was already slowing, but the aliens remained frozen in their positions, observing him with what looked like a mixture of horror and fascination. "Can someone please turn off that alarm?" Kyle asked, finishing the knot on his bandaged doctor. Nelvax, the station commander, burst through the doorway, followed by 2 security personnel wearing what appeared to be hazardous material suits. He was a Prontarian, shorter than the Vexillians, with gray skin and a single central eye that widened dramatically at the sight of Kyle. "What happened here? The emergency protocols have activated throughout the entire medical deck," Nelvax demanded, his eye darting between Kyle and the terrified Vexillian medics. "I cut my arm on that broken sample container," Kyle explained, pointing to the glass like shards on the floor. "It's a minor injury. I've already bandaged it myself, but your medical team seems to be uncomfortable with human blood." Nelvax approached cautiously, examining Kyle's makeshift bandage. "You contained your own bodily fluid with torn clothing. Standard human first aid," Kyle replied. "Nothing special." The alien commander's expression was unreadable, but the tension in his posture was clear. Most species in the coalition have internal circulatory systems that do not leak visible fluids when damaged. The sight of free-flowing bodily fluid is quite disturbing to many of our staff. "I gathered that," Kyle said dryly, glancing at the still trembling Vexillian medics. "But you do realize that as part of this exchange program, you'll need to get used to human physiology. We bleed. It happens, Doctor." Nelvax touched a control on his wrist device, and mercifully, the alarm stopped. "This is precisely why the exchange program exists, Officer Evans. We have much to learn from each other, though I admit we may have underestimated certain visceral differences." One of the Vexillian medics, Dr. Pren, had recovered enough to step forward tentatively. "You applied pressure directly to the wound site and created a barrier to prevent further fluid loss, without any sterilization protocols or synthetic sealing agents." Kyle nodded. "Basic first aid." The human body can handle minor wounds pretty well on its own. The bandage just helps control the bleeding until the clotting process completes. "Fascinating," Dr. Pren whispered, though he still maintained a safe distance. "Your species must sustain frequent injuries to have developed such improvised techniques. We're resilient," Kyle said with a shrug, then winced as the motion pulled at his injury. But I could still use some proper medical attention if anyone's willing to help. Dr. Nelvax gestured to one of the security personnel. Escort Officer Evans to the xenobiology lab. Dr. Larn has studied human physiology more extensively and should be able to provide appropriate care. He turned to the Vixillian medics. And you three will report for immediate sensitivity training. The Coalition expects better from its medical professionals. As Kyle was led from the room, he heard Dr. Trell muttering something that his translator rendered as, "But the fluid was outside the body, just flowing freely. How is that not an emergency?" Kyle wondered, not for the first time, what exactly he had gotten himself into when he volunteered for this assignment. The xenobiology lab was a stark contrast to the medical bay, less clinical, more cluttered with specimens and equipment that Kyle couldn't begin to identify. Dr. Larn, a Tentaran with pale green skin and six-finger-like appendages on each hand, greeted him with what appeared to be genuine interest rather than fear. "Ah, the human medical officer. I've been hoping to meet you under better circumstances," Larn said, guiding Kyle to a cushioned examination platform. "May I examine your injury?" Kyle extended his arm. "It's just a cut, nothing serious, doctor." Larn carefully unwrapped Kyle's makeshift bandage, studying the wound with an analytical eye. "Remarkable improvisation. Your species has evolved practical solutions to your rather exposed circulatory system." "We've had to," Kyle replied, watching as the alien doctor examined the cut with a handheld scanner. "Our medical science developed around our biology. Bleeding is a normal part of human injuries. Most coalition species have evolved internal healing mechanisms that don't involve visible fluid loss," Dr. Larn explained while preparing what looked like a small device with a glowing tip. "External wounds typically seal immediately or present as color changes in the affected tissue. The sight of free-flowing bodily fluid is considered a catastrophic medical emergency for most." "I guess I can understand their panic then," Kyle admitted, "though it seems like a major oversight in a medical exchange program not to brief your staff on human physiology. Doctor." Larn made a sound that might have been a chuckle. "Politics. The exchange was rushed through to improve relations with Earth. The practical details were overlooked." He held up the device. "This is a cellular regenerator. It will accelerate your natural healing process. May I proceed?" Kyle nodded, and the alien doctor passed the device slowly over the wound. A warm, tingling sensation spread through Kyle's arm, and he watched in fascination as the edges of the cut began to close. "That's incredible," Kyle said. "Much faster than our medical technology." "Perhaps, doctor." Larn replied, "But your improvised solution was quite effective for immediate care. Most coalition species would be incapacitated by panic if they suffered a similar injury." As the doctor finished treating the wound, the door to the lab slid open, and Station Administrator Jevnar entered. The tall, thin alien had an almost translucent quality to his skin, through which Kyle could see the outlines of a complex circulatory system, though notably no red blood. "Officer Evans," Jevnar said formally, "I understand there was an incident in the medical bay." "A minor accident," Kyle replied. "Just a cut. That caused 3 of our senior medical staff to trigger emergency protocols and put an entire deck on biohazard lockdown," Jevnar added dryly. "Not quite minor in terms of operational impact." Kyle felt his face grow warm with embarrassment. "I apologize for the disruption." Jevnar made a dismissive gesture with one elongated hand. "The fault lies with our preparation, not with you. However, this incident highlights a significant issue that must be addressed if the exchange program is to succeed. The physiological differences between humans and coalition species," Kyle suggested. "Precisely," Jevnar confirmed. "We need proper protocols for human medical emergencies, and our staff requires extensive training to overcome their instinctive responses to your biological processes, doctor." Larn, who had finished treating Kyle's arm, joined the conversation. "I believe this presents an opportunity. Officer Evans clearly possesses practical knowledge of human emergency care. Perhaps he could assist in developing training programs for our medical staff. Kyle considered this. He'd come to the station as part of the exchange to learn alien medical techniques, not to teach basics of human first aid. But the day's events had made it clear that such knowledge was desperately needed. "I'd be happy to help," he said finally. "Though I'm not sure how well your staff will handle the practical demonstrations." Jevnar's expression shifted in what Kyle was beginning to recognize as the alien equivalent of a grimace. "We will need to implement a gradual exposure program, perhaps beginning with simulations rather than actual." "Fluid? I can work with that," Kyle agreed, "but eventually they'll need to get comfortable with the real thing. Humans bleed. It's a fact of our biology that can't be changed." "Indeed," Jevnar said. "And this exchange program was created precisely to bridge such gaps in understanding. I will arrange for you to have access to our training facilities and educational resources." As the administrator left, Dr. Larn turned to Kyle with what might have been excitement. "This is a fascinating opportunity. I've studied human biology theoretically, but having a living specimen, forgive me, a living expert to consult with is invaluable." Kyle smiled despite himself. At least one alien on the station wasn't terrified of him. "Happy to help. Though I should warn you, blood is just the beginning of the human biological processes that might shock your colleagues." Dr. Larn's expression was unreadable, but his voice carried a note of genuine curiosity. "I look forward to learning all of it." "Knowledge is worth a little discomfort, wouldn't you agree?" "That's why I'm here," Kyle replied, looking down at his healed arm where only a faint pink line remained. "Though maybe we should start with something simple like why humans need bandages in the first place." The next morning, Kyle found himself in the station's education center, facing a group of 20 medical professionals from various species. They sat at a safe distance, their body language conveying varying degrees of apprehension. "Thank you all for coming," Kyle began, standing beside a human anatomical hologram he'd programmed with Dr. Larn's help. "After yesterday's incident, it's clear that we need to address some basic facts about human physiology, particularly our circulatory system." A Vixillian raised a hand. Kyle recognized Dr. Pren from the previous day. "Is it true that your species constantly produces this red fluid and it circulates throughout your entire body at all times?" Kyle nodded. "Yes, human blood is essential to our survival. It carries oxygen, nutrients, and immune cells throughout our bodies." A murmur ran through the audience, a mixture of fascination and discomfort. "And this fluid, this blood, is always contained within specialized vessels?" asked another alien, a small, furry being Kyle hadn't met before. "Yes, our blood vessels, arteries, veins, and capillaries form a closed system," Kyle explained, highlighting the circulatory system on the hologram. "Under normal circumstances, blood stays inside this system. Yet yesterday it was outside," Dr. Trell stated, her 4 eyes blinking in unison. "When our skin and blood vessels are damaged, yes, blood can escape," Kyle confirmed. "Our bodies have natural mechanisms to stop bleeding, clotting factors in the blood itself that form seals over wounds. But until that process completes, we sometimes need external help like pressure or bandages." He demonstrated on the hologram, showing how blood clotting worked and how bandages assisted the process. The aliens watched with intense focus, though several still showed physical signs of discomfort. "The alarming aspect," said Dr. Nelvax, who had joined the session, "is that your species considers this normal and not an immediate life-threatening emergency." "For minor wounds, it's not," Kyle assured them. "Humans have evolved to handle small amounts of blood loss without serious consequences. Our bodies continuously produce new blood cells." "And the torn garment technique?" Dr. Pren asked. "Is this standard medical procedure for humans?" Kyle couldn't help but smile. "It's what we call improvisation. In emergency situations, humans use whatever materials are available. Ideally, we'd use sterile bandages, but clean cloth will work in a pinch." The discussion continued for 2 hours, with Kyle answering increasingly detailed questions about human wound care, blood composition, and emergency procedures. By the end, the medical staff still seemed uneasy, but their curiosity had begun to overcome their initial horror. Tomorrow, Kyle announced as the session concluded, we'll move on to practical demonstrations with simulated human blood. This announcement sent another ripple of anxiety through the room, but no one objected outright. Progress, Kyle thought. Slow but definite progress. Over the next week, Kyle worked closely with Dr. Larn to develop a comprehensive training program. They started with holographic simulations, then moved to models with synthetic blood, and finally to supervised practice sessions where the alien medics could practice bandaging techniques on specialized dummies. The breakthrough came on the 8th day, when Dr. Pren successfully completed a simulated emergency response to a human with a laceration, applying pressure and a bandage without triggering the station's emergency protocols. I still find the concept unsettling, Doctor. Pren admitted afterward, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of thoughtfulness Kyle had learned. But I can now respond professionally rather than instinctively. That's all anyone can ask, Kyle assured him. Medical professionals across the galaxy share one common goal: helping patients, regardless of species. Dr. Larn, who had been observing the training sessions with increasing enthusiasm, approached Kyle later that evening in the station's common area. Your training program is showing remarkable results, the alien doctor said, settling onto a seat designed to accommodate multiple body types. The medical staff's anxiety responses have decreased by 73% according to our biometric monitoring. Kyle looked up from his datapad where he'd been preparing the next day's lesson on human burn treatment. That's good to hear. They're adapting faster than I expected. Necessity is a powerful motivator, Dr. Larn replied, especially after the consortium announcement. Kyle frowned. What announcement? Dr. Larn's expression shifted to what Kyle now recognized as surprise. You haven't been informed. The Interstellar Transport Consortium has approved human passenger transport on all major routes. The station has been designated as the primary emergency medical facility for the sector. Wait, Kyle said, straightening in his chair. You're saying human travelers will be coming through this sector regularly, and this station is supposed to provide emergency care if needed. Precisely, Doctor. Larn confirmed. Administrator Jevnar received the notification yesterday. I assumed you had been briefed. Kyle shook his head. This changes everything. We've been treating this training as theoretical, something your staff might need someday. But if human passengers will be traveling through regularly, then our medical team must be fully prepared for human emergencies, Dr. Larn finished, including those involving visible blood loss. We need to accelerate the training program, Kyle said, his mind racing through the implications. And expand it beyond just bandaging techniques. Human medical emergencies can involve all sorts of conditions your staff might find disturbing. Dr. Larn's expression was unreadable, but his voice carried a note of determination. Then we shall learn what is necessary. I will speak with Administrator Jevnar about allocating additional resources to your training program. 2 days later, Kyle found himself addressing not just the medical staff, but the station's entire senior personnel, including administrators, security officers, and environmental specialists. The approval of human passenger transport through this sector means all of you may encounter humans in emergency situations, Kyle explained, standing before the assembled aliens. While the medical staff has begun training to handle human injuries, everyone on this station should understand basic human first aid principles. Administrator Jevnar stepped forward. Officer Evans has prepared simplified guidelines for non-medical personnel. These will be distributed to all departments today. Kyle activated a holographic display showing a human figure with basic first aid instructions. The most important thing to remember is that many human injuries involve visible fluid loss blood, but this doesn't always indicate a life-threatening emergency. Follow these basic steps. Apply pressure to bleeding wounds, keep the injured person warm and calm, and contact medical personnel immediately. The training session continued with basic demonstrations and questions from the increasingly engaged audience. By the end, Kyle felt cautiously optimistic that the station personnel were beginning to understand human medical needs. As the session concluded, Dr. Nelvax approached Kyle with what appeared to be a reluctant admiration. Your species' ability to cope with physical trauma is impressive. Though I still find the visual aspects disturbing, I cannot deny the practical effectiveness of your methods. We've had millennia to develop ways to handle our rather fragile bodies, Kyle replied with a smile. Humans have always had to improvise to survive. The intercom system suddenly crackled to life. Medical emergency in Docking Bay 3, incoming transport with injured human passenger. All qualified personnel respond immediately. Kyle felt his pulse quicken. That's sooner than expected, Doctor. Nelvax's 4 eyes widened, but to his credit, he didn't panic. This will be the real test of our training. Are you ready, Officer Evans? Let's find out, Kyle replied, already moving toward the exit. They arrived at Docking Bay 3 to find a small transport vessel had already docked. Security personnel were creating a perimeter as Dr. Larn directed a medical team with a hovering stretcher toward the airlock. What's the situation? Kyle asked, joining Dr. Larn. Transport vessel Starlight Voyager reports a human passenger suffered a traumatic injury during an unexpected gravity fluctuation, Dr. Larn explained. The passenger is conscious, but has sustained what the human captain describes as a compound fracture of the lower limb. Kyle winced. That's serious. The bone has broken through the skin. There will be significant bleeding. Dr. Larn nodded. I have prepared the medical team with this information. They have been instructed to focus on their training rather than their instinctive responses. The airlock cycled open, and 2 human crew members emerged, supporting a third between them. The injured passenger, a middle-aged man with graying hair, had what appeared to be makeshift splints around his right leg, which was indeed bleeding through hastily applied bandages. Medical help's here, Mark, one of the crew members said to the injured man. They'll fix you right up. The alien medical team approached, and Kyle was proud to see only minimal hesitation as they assessed the situation. Doctor. Pren took the lead, his 4 eyes scanning the injury with professional detachment rather than horror. Please place the patient on the hovering stretcher, Dr. Pren instructed the human crew members. We need to stabilize the limb and control the bleeding before transport to Medical Bay. Kyle stepped forward. I'm Kyle Evans, Human Medical Exchange Officer. Can you tell me what happened? The injured man grimaced in pain as he was carefully transferred to the stretcher. Ship hit something. Gravity went crazy for a few seconds. I was thrown across the cabin and landed badly. Felt the snap and, well, saw the bone. Kyle nodded, then turned to Dr. Pren. Classic compound fracture. We need to clean the wound, realign the bone, and stop the bleeding before any attempt at advanced treatment. To Kyle's amazement and pride, the alien medical team worked with remarkable efficiency, applying pressure bandages to control the bleeding while preparing to transport the patient. There were no alarms, no panicked reactions to the sight of blood, just professional medical care. As they moved the patient toward the medical bay, Dr. Larn fell into step beside Kyle. Your training has been effective. 3 weeks ago, this scene would have triggered station-wide emergency protocols. They're doing well, Kyle agreed, though the real challenge will be the treatment itself. Resetting a compound fracture is messy work. In the medical bay, the team transferred the injured human to an examination table specifically configured for human physiology. Dr. Nelvax supervised as doctor. Pren and 2 other Vexillian medics carefully removed the makeshift splints and bandages to expose the injury. The bone had indeed broken through the skin, creating a jagged wound that was bleeding steadily. Kyle watched carefully for signs of panic among the alien medical staff, but to his relief, they remained focused on the task. We will need to clean the wound, realign the bone, and seal the damaged tissue, Dr. Nelvax stated calmly. Officer Evans, is this assessment correct? Kyle nodded. Yes. On Earth, this would typically require surgery, but I believe your regenerative technology can handle it more directly. Indeed, Dr. Larn confirmed, preparing several devices that Kyle recognized from his own treatment. We will administer pain management first, then proceed with bone realignment and tissue regeneration. The injured man, who had been stoically enduring the examination, looked at Kyle with concern. They know what they're doing with human bones. They do, Kyle assured him. I've been training them on human physiology. Their technology is actually more advanced than ours for this kind of injury. You're in good hands, or whatever they have that's equivalent to hands. This drew a pained smile from the patient. Not how I plan to make first contact with alien doctors, but I guess it beats bleeding out in space. The treatment proceeded with remarkable efficiency. The alien medical team administered pain medication, then carefully cleaned and sterilized the wound. Using a combination of physical manipulation and targeted energy fields, they realigned the broken bone. Then, with regenerative devices similar to the one that had healed Kyle's cut, they began sealing the wound and accelerating the bone's natural healing process. Throughout the procedure, Kyle provided guidance and reassurance, both to the patient and to the medical team. What might have taken hours of surgery and weeks of recovery on Earth was being handled in a single session. The bone integrity is restored to approximately 60%, Doctor. Larn reported after scanning the injury. The soft tissue damage has been repaired, and we have enhanced the local cellular regeneration rate. Full recovery should occur within 7 to 10 days. The patient looked down at his leg in amazement. Where there had been a bloody open fracture, there was now only a faint red line and some bruising. That's incredible. I thought I'd be in a cast for months. Coalition medical technology has certain advantages, Kyle explained. Though I have to say, I'm equally impressed by how well the medical team handled the sight of human blood. 3 weeks ago, they would have been hiding in the corner. Dr. Pren, who overheard this comment, straightened with what might have been pride. We are medical professionals. Learning to overcome our instinctive reactions is part of our duty. Well, I'm grateful you did, the patient said sincerely. Thank you all. As the treatment concluded and the patient was moved to a recovery area, Administrator Jevnar entered the medical bay. He observed the scene with what Kyle had learned to recognize as satisfaction. I have received a report from the transport captain, Jevnar announced. He was highly impressed by our medical response and will be submitting a commendation to the consortium. This is precisely the outcome we hoped for from the exchange program. Kyle felt a surge of pride. The medical team deserves the credit. They've worked incredibly hard to overcome their natural reactions to human physiology. As have you, Officer Evans, Jevnar replied. Your adaptability and patience have been instrumental to this success. Dr. Nelvax joined them, his posture more relaxed than Kyle had ever seen. This incident has demonstrated that our preparation was not merely theoretical. With increased human traffic through this sector, we can expect more such cases. And we'll be ready for them, Kyle assured him, though maybe with less drama than my first week here. Speaking of which, Dr. Larn interjected, approaching with a small container. I have completed the analysis of human blood composition that you authorized. The results are fascinating. Kyle raised an eyebrow. You've been studying my blood sample? With your permission, yes, Dr. Larn confirmed. The hemoglobin-based oxygen transport system is remarkably efficient, if somewhat prone to visibility when outside the vascular system. That's one way of putting it, Kyle said with a laugh. Any other insights into human biology you'd like to share, Doctor? Larn's expression shifted in what Kyle now recognized as enthusiasm. Several. Your species' clotting mechanisms are particularly interesting. The cascading enzymatic reactions that form solid barriers at wound sites could have applications for species that lack similar natural defenses. Administrator Jevnar made a sound that might have been a discreet cough. Perhaps these discussions would be better continued in the research laboratory rather than the medical bay. Of course, Dr. Larn agreed, though his excitement remained evident. Officer Evans, when you have time, I would appreciate your insight on several potential adaptive technologies we might develop based on human wound response methods. As the others dispersed to their duties, Kyle found himself alone with Dr. Nelvax. The Vexillian chief medical officer seemed to be contemplating something. Your torn shirt, Dr. Nelvax said finally. The day you were injured, I have been considering that moment. Kyle waited, curious where this was going. It demonstrated something important about your species, the alien doctor continued. Not just your biology, but your approach to problems. When faced with a crisis, you immediately adapted available resources to address the need. It's just human nature, Kyle replied. We work with what we have. Perhaps, Dr. Nelvax acknowledged, but it is a quality worth studying. Coalition medical practices have become highly standardized and equipment-dependent. Your improvisation suggests alternative approaches we might consider. Kyle smiled. I think that's the whole point of this exchange program. We all have something to learn from each other. Indeed, Dr. Nelvax agreed, though perhaps with less bleeding in future lessons. 3 months later, Kyle stood in the observation lounge of the medical station, watching as a coalition passenger vessel docked. The ship carried the first large group of human tourists approved for travel through this sector of space, 27 Earth citizens on a Galactic Wonders excursion. Dr. Larn joined him at the viewport. The medical staff is fully prepared for any human emergencies. We have even stocked traditional Earth bandages, though our regenerative technology is far more efficient. Sometimes efficiency isn't everything, Kyle replied, but I appreciate the gesture. How are the staff feeling about potentially dealing with human injuries? Surprisingly comfortable, Dr. Larn said. After treating 17 human patients over the past 3 months, the sight of red blood no longer triggers panic responses. Dr. Pren has even developed a specialization in human emergency care. Kyle nodded with satisfaction. And the research we've been doing on adaptive medical techniques, progressing well, Dr. Larn confirmed. The Coalition Medical Authority has expressed interest in our findings, particularly the application of human-inspired improvisation techniques for emergency situations where standard equipment is unavailable. The station's intercom system activated. Attention all personnel. Human tour group now boarding through Docking Bay 1. Welcome protocols in effect. Kyle straightened his uniform. As the station's human liaison officer, a position created specifically for him after the success of his training program, he would be responsible for greeting the tourists and orienting them to station protocols. Duty calls, he said to Dr. Larn. Let's hope none of them need medical attention during their stay. Dr. Larn made the chittering sound that Kyle had learned was laughter. If they do, we are prepared, though perhaps you should keep your shirt intact this time. Kyle grinned as he headed toward the docking bay. In 3 short months, the station had transformed from a place where the sight of human blood caused panic to a facility fully equipped to handle human medical needs. It wasn't just the aliens who had learned and grown. Kyle had gained invaluable knowledge about coalition medical technology and xenobiology. As he walked, his hand unconsciously touched the spot on his arm where he'd been cut that first week. The injury had healed without a trace, thanks to alien medical technology. But the incident had left something more important behind: the beginning of true understanding between different species. The doors to the docking bay slid open, revealing a group of excited human tourists staring in wonder at their alien surroundings. Kyle stepped forward to greet them, ready to bridge the gap between worlds once more. Welcome to Interstellar Medical Exchange Station Epsilon, he announced with a smile. My name is Kyle Evans, Human Liaison Officer. On behalf of the Galactic Health Coalition, I'm here to ensure your visit is both safe and educational. And I promise if anyone gets a paper cut, our medical team is fully prepared to handle it without triggering a station-wide emergency. The tourists laughed, unaware of just how literal that statement was. Kyle caught Dr. Nelvax's 4-eyed gaze across the docking bay and exchanged a knowing nod with the alien doctor. They had come a long way from that first day when alien medics froze at the sight of blood and Kyle had to rip his shirt into a bandage. Now, human and alien medical knowledge had begun to merge, creating something greater than either had been alone. It wasn't just about overcoming the fear of blood, it was about recognizing that different evolutionary paths led to different solutions, all valuable in their own way. As Kyle began his orientation speech for the tourists, he felt a sense of genuine optimism about the future of human-alien relations. Sometimes, it took a crisis to build understanding. And sometimes, the simplest actions like tearing a shirt into a bandage could become the foundation for something much larger than anyone expected.